Combine 2020, bitch! What is going on, Headliner Nation? This is a first. Kyle and I doing a show together in the same room. Kyle, we're not even like Skyping right now.
Yeah, it's not like I'm staring at a computer and like looking at your face.
No,
it's an actual show.
This is a little weird, but you know what? Here it is. It's the 2020 NFL Combine, and boy, do we have a super busy day. The quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, they were all front and center. And we got a ton of information for you guys. Now, we are going to be including some clips that we got here from our interviews there today while these guys were on the podium. However, we don't want this video to be like an hour and 54 minutes long. There are a lot of clips on our Twitters. Our Twitters are linked below in the description. Go follow both of us on Twitter, and you'll get a lot of extra information. Just because we didn't want to bog down the video. Like I said, we'll mention the key highlights here, but if you want to see the actual video, we'll have some clips, but everything else, go to Twitter. Don't be lazy. Go check it out. Now, we want to start off with quarterbacks, Kyle, because there's a lot of big-name quarterbacks.
That's where the money's at. That's where the money's at.
And follow the money.
Follow the money.
I mean, everybody's all about the Benjamins.
I was going to start singing. I'm not going to.
Do people say that anymore?
I don't think so.
They're about to make it rain? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of rich, young guys in Vegas in just a couple months. And the first one that we're going to be talking about is none other than Mr. Possible #1 overall himself, Joe Burrow of LSU. The crowd that surrounded Joe Burrow today was absolutely insane.
When you walked up to the podium to get that shot of Joe Burrow, he completely disappeared. He was gone. And Jake's not the smallest guy in the world either. So for that crowd to just make you disappear it was pretty insane.
Yeah, no, and I mean, he's not going to be partaking in the combine drills here. It's going to be something he does in Pro Day. We heard this a lot from the LSU guys. They played an extra month this year with their national championship win, so they're taking that extra month just to go to their Pro Day. So he will not be competing in on-field drills. So getting a chance to actually talk to Joe Burrow was great. And, you know, one of the biggest things a lot of people question right off the bat, does he want to play for the Bengals? And of course he does, and this is one of the video clips that you'll be able to go check out on Twitter. He says he's a ball player. It doesn't matter who takes him. He's going to go there and he's going to play. It doesn't matter if it's the Bengals or anybody else.
Yeah, no, and honestly, a couple of months ago when that report had come out that he didn't want to go to Cincinnati, I think that was overblown. And he kind of talked to that a little bit today and said, you know, he called the media out a little bit. I mean, he wasn't a jerk about it. He wasn't rude, didn't really have an attitude. He just said, you know, that was a story that y'all kind of ran with. That's not something coming from my camp. That's not how I feel. I don't think he's doing damage control. I think some people are going to look at it like that, but I don't think he was, because I think the story was actually overblown.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse in this life than being overblown, Kyle.
That just happened.
That's awkward. All right, another thing that kind of came up is, you know, the media referenced the cockiness, kind of the confidence that he has, the Baker Mayfield-esque personality, and you could see it all over the podium today. This guy was not nervous at all. He came up there. He had a lot of confidence, and he actually addressed this in a question. He's like, listen, that just is because of preparation. I feel like I'm very well prepared, and that just leads to confidence. It's not so much that I'm cocky. I'm just confident.
Yeah, and I love that answer. I think, you know, saying that this is coming from being prepared and not being cocky. But you know what? Winning cures everything. You go to Cincinnati and you turn that into a playoff team, it's not going to matter if you're a little bit cocky at that point.
No, absolutely not. Last thing, it was funny here earlier in the week, hand size was brought up. The smallest hand size. I really wanted to ask him what it means to have small hands. Like, what does that usually tell you? I couldn't, bring myself to do it, but he addressed this question also. Obviously, it was one of the first ones that he got. And basically, he said, you know what, listen, if I had a lot of turnovers in college, had I been fumbling the ball a lot, had I had ball security issues, then maybe we talk about it. But I haven't had those issues, so don't bring it up now. I mean, he's got the same size hands as Jared Goff. It's proven that he's been able to produce.
Yeah, I think he'll end up being fine. I'm not worried about the hand size personally.
No.
That's what she said. But I'm sorry.
Well, anyway, next up, Tua Tagovailoa. Did I say it right?
You got it. You nailed it. I know in the last video you were scared to put it in.
Tagovailoa.
Well, you got it.
Tagovailoa. I may be wrong still, but this is probably the second largest crowd that we saw all day long. A lot of people wanted to know about Tua, and right off the bat, one of the first questions, What's the status of the hip? When can you return? He actually gave a date for his doctors to clear him by March 9th for an April 9th pro day. That was big news right off the bat. I put it right on Twitter the second it came out of his mouth. The next thing you know, the clip on Twitter had over 20,000 views. Yeah. It was picked up by a couple other big outlets, and that's a big news. I mean, a lot of people are like, is this guy going to play football today or this year? Not only is he going to play possibly or eligible to play, he may be way ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and the good thing about this is he's going to get a chance to get a workout in before the draft. So teams are going to get a chance to see him a little bit and make sure that he is, maybe not 100% healthy, but showing that, this injury that, he's had isn't going to be nearly as detrimental to maybe his short-term and long-term success. And, for NFL teams making an investment right now, I think getting a chance to see him on the field and moving around a little bit, I think is a big step towards seeing his value go back up to where it may have been, pre-injury.
I mean, everybody was talking about tank for Tua just, about a year ago.
Yep.
But he's probably one of the most humble NFL prospects that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was borderline shy on the podium. He didn't want to sit up there and talk about the things that he does good. He just didn't want to talk about himself a whole lot. He was fine with the process, and he would talk about other prospects. He had a lot of respect for Joe Burrow, but just not the type of guy that's really going to boost himself up. He's just not that type of guy. Yeah. And I think a lot of people knew that going into it. He was fine with going to a franchise that possibly wants him to sit for a year or two behind a veteran. That's something he's okay with. It's not like he's saying, listen, I got to start this year. He understands the process. That's definitely something you want to hear out of a prospect like that that's going through the injury that he has.
Yeah, absolutely.
Outside of that, the biggest thing, though, the pro day, that's something we really want to focus on. That's where we're going to start to see a little bit of the mobility, the movement. If Tua is healthy, this is going to wreak havoc on a lot of draft boards, and the trade talks are going to start ramping up. So it's definitely something that we need to pay attention to for Tua.
Yep.
Next up, Justin Herbert, Oregon. And this guy, he was intriguing. He was humble also. He wasn't exactly, the presence of a Joe Burrow or a Tua. I mean, but he commanded a lot of attention. There was a decent crowd around him. But the biggest issue that people had with him, and they brought it up here, is does his game from college translate to the NFL? And, the no-huddle offense, the lack of taking snaps under center. But he recognized this, and he called it out when he answered a question, what were some of his biggest weaknesses? That's what he answered. We have a clip of that also up on Twitter.
Yeah, and like we said at the beginning of the video, with these three prospects, really long interviews. Jake got entire videos of the entire thing. A couple of them are like 15 minutes long. So that's why we have them over on Twitter, so you can go check those out and see the extended clip of it. But we're going to have some different clips coming up. But yeah, with those, there was just so much information to process with those guys. Herbert's a guy on the rise. We definitely want to see where he ends up coming up to. I mean, there was some talk about, how does Burrow do during his pro day? Does Herbert end up coming up a little bit closer to him? Is there a team that maybe jumps, for Herbert before Tua? So there's a lot of things that can happen with these three quarterbacks over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I think the health of Tua, like we just mentioned, is kind of going to play a part of what happens with Herbert here going forward. If Tua is healthy, bad news for Herbert. If Tua is still a little bit limited, that still opens the door. He was surprisingly bigger than I expected. Now, I know going into it, he was measured 6'6", 236. I mean, he's not a small quarterback, but he was every bit of that 6'6". I'm not a short guy, and he was still taller than I was when he walked off the podium. But he also addressed his maturity. He wasn't quite that leader when he got to Oregon, but by the time he's leaving here, he really mentioned that he became that confident quarterback. He wasn't shy and passive anymore. He was ready to get to work, and that's part of the reason why he came back this past year, instead of coming out a year ago.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought that decision ended up hurting him, but now we're seeing he bet on himself, and, after a successful Senior Bowl, maybe a good combine here, maybe it doesn't end up hurting him nearly as much as everyone once thought.
Yep, exactly. Next up, my boy, is Jake.
Jake from State Farm.
No, Jake from State Farm.
Jake from State Farm.
That's right. Jake Fromm.
Yes. And I was really excited to see Jake Fromm because I right now he's kind of my quarterback 4, and I don't think a lot of people agree with that. I think there's a couple of other guys that might be above him, but I was really excited to see him and hear some of his answers, because the one thing that's stricken me about Jake Fromm is that he's very confident in himself. And the one thing, and this might sound kind of weird, I think Jake Fromm can handle the pressure. We're going to show you a clip here in a second of kind of what he said about that, but I think he can handle the pressure of going to a team where maybe he does have to wait a year or two. However, he's going to handle the pressure of coming in and kind of being that next one. Maybe that's the Patriots. Who knows? He did say that he's already met with the Patriots. He did say that he has another meeting scheduled with the Patriots soon. Maybe they are a team that tried to jump into the second round to grab him if he has a really good pro day. But, he has NCAA playoff experience. He has played in at least 14 games all 3 years that he was in college. And then on top of that, and this might not seem like interesting information, but I like to throw these little tidbits out. His senior year in high school, he was actually one of the main stars of a Netflix documentary I believe it's called QB1. And what that did is it followed him around his senior year and his decision to go to Georgia. And as a senior in high school, that might be a little bit of a pressure to have those documentary crews around you the entire time. But he didn't. And this is kind of what he had to say about his experience and why he thinks that it's going to translate well to the next level.
All playoff games and just really big games for his career.
It helps out a lot. You really kind of puts a lot of experience in your back pocket, knowing you can walk in any situation, be able to handle it. And really, you see a lot. There's a lot of things going on in games like that, atmospheres like that. I really feel I can kind of walk into any room, any kind of situation, and be able to handle it the best way possible.
So you can hear it there from Jake from himself, how confident he is, in becoming, a successful NFL quarterback for a franchise that's willing to take that risk in drafting him. Another thing, too, that I really liked about his answer in terms of who does he kind of, want to become? Who does he want to be at the NFL level? And I really thought it was a perfect answer because, quite honestly, I think there might be some similarities between these two players, but he said Drew Brees, and this is kind of what he had to say about that.
Any quarterbacks or lobsters are emulated?
I would love to try to emulate my game the best way possible after Drew Brees. The way he approaches the game, the way he works, the way he throws. Hopefully I can be as close to him as possible.
So yeah, I don't think Jake Fromm is going to become Drew Brees-esque, but I think the one thing about Jake Fromm is that he has lots of confidence, but what he lacks, and maybe some of his arm talent, or other things that maybe you would see from some bigger time prospects, is his decision making and his poise. And I think those are two things that are really good about Drew Brees is he has those type of characteristics in his game that Fromm could absolutely bring to a team. And maybe he's not ever going to be a quarterback that's going to win an MVP, or he's not going to be a guy that's going to throw for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns, but I think he can be a guy that can help teams win games and get to the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in case you were wondering, no, he was not wearing khakis.
He was not. No khakis. No khakis today.
No khakis in sight today. All right, so those were the quarterbacks. Next on, we're going to touch on a few of the wide receivers. Now, were the wide receivers as a whole overly exciting? Not really. So much. They were somewhat underwhelming for the most part. First one we're going to talk about, I had a chance to sit there and hear Jerry Jeudy of Alabama. For a lot of people, their wide receiver one here in this draft. There's just not a whole lot of fireworks. He had a little bit of a comment there at the beginning that was a little bit controversial, that was blowing up on social media. I'm not going to get into that here. One thing that was somewhat interesting to me though is he was asked if he'd met with Arizona yet, because Arizona has that early round pick, and there's always rumors of Cliff Kingsbury wanting to have that deep threat, that speedy receiver on the outside. And he said he'd met with them, and they kind of, talked to him. What was his abilities in this offense? How could he fit in? Jerry Jeudy is going to go in the first round. It's who's going to take that chance on him, because there are some other wide receivers, some who we're going to mention here in a minute, who are just a lot more impressive today. Now, obviously, today doesn't matter. It's once you get on the football field, and we'll see a lot of these drills and stuff here over the next, couple of days. But Jerry Jeudy, this side of Jerry Jeudy, somewhat not entertaining.
Yeah. And I think a couple of the wide receivers were like that today, so it doesn't really surprise me that much.
No, it's not one of those things where, these guys are going to be great interviews. They're going to be, at times, that diva-ish mentality that we see from a lot of wide receivers. They all think they're the best. They all, aren't going to compare themselves to others because they don't think that they have to. They think that they're above and beyond. So that was kind of a common theme for the most part for the wide receivers. There was one who really stood out to Kyle here, and if you follow him on Twitter, you know what he's already said about Jalen Reagor of TCU.
Yeah, and I love Jalen Reagor. And in our last mock draft, our first mock draft of the season, of the off season, really, I had him decently high. He's basically the wide receiver 3 off the board for me right now. But after the combine, he might be my wide receiver 1, and that might be a little bit of a sizzling hot take right now. But it's bold. You have to keep an eye on him. You absolutely have to keep an eye on this kid because I think he's going to be really, really good. And one of the things that I pointed to in the mock draft about Reagor was that I think the reason he goes above Ruggs in this draft and in this process is because he's going to offer comparable speed, but he's got a little bit more of a defined route tree right now. He's a little bit better with his route tree on several of those routes, and he talked about that in depth right here.
I can run anything, a curl, go ball, post corner, post, in route. So whatever I need to run, I can run it.
Your usage at TCU, a lot of X, right wide receiver, but do you see yourself in a more versatile role at the next level, slot, maybe even some backfield stuff?
Absolutely. I did it in college. So, like I said, whatever the team needs me to do, I'll be able to do it.
Is there a player that you compare yourself to?
Right now, I kind of like Deebo Samuel. So, him, Stephon Diggs, and probably Tyreek Hill.
You mentioned Deebo Samuel, and now the 49ers, they use him, but at TCU, they use you in a similar way in so many roles. What allowed you to be effective jet sweeps, screens, etc.?
Just my versatility. I've been doing that since high school, since I even started playing football, just being able to play whatever. I know the whole offense, and just being able to know the playbook.
Do you have any running back in your back?
I do. I played running back all the way up until my freshman year.
And not only did he mention, what his route tree is there and what, some of those strong points are, but he also compared himself to some good players in the NFL right now. Obviously Stephon Diggs sticks out there. Tyreek Hill is an interesting one. Deebo Samuel is an even more interesting one because of the way he was used by the 49ers this year. And he got a couple of questions about that. After he said Deebo Samuel, they said, what can you do? They talked to him about playing out of the slot. They talked to him about playing on the outside. Can they use him in the backfield? Can they use him for different plays to really get him into open space? And that question came up from somebody else as well about was he misused at TCU last year with a little bit of back and forth at quarterbacks and things of that nature. Maybe the film doesn't stick out to a lot of people right now because he wasn't really put in the best positions, but this was his answer for that.
Do you think the role that you played your final season at TCU was the best usage of your skill set? Not a lot of touches in space.
Right.
Were you surprised you didn't get more chances to create post-catch?
It was surprising, but I feel like it was a time for me to show my real character, just to show that I can lead without the ball, lead without being always getting the ball 12 times a game. So I just felt like it's just showing teams what I can do without the ball.
Do you think the quarterback play limited you a bit last year?
I wouldn't say just limited. It was just rhythm. I was going back to practice and I have a different quarterback, or just like being a receiver and a quarterback, you have to have rhythm with that quarterback, and it was hard to get on track sometimes.
So really good answers there from Reagor. I really enjoyed listening to him. I thought he was very personable. I thought he did a good job of really answering those questions, whereas some of the other wide receivers, it was kind of those cookie cutter type answers that you hear from a lot of these guys. And I don't put too much stock into that. I'm not going to knock a guy down because he doesn't have a great interview in front of a bunch of media people, because some of these kids, they're not used to it or not comfortable with it. With guys like T. Higgins, CD Lamb, again, really good athletes, really good wide receivers, but they didn't give those kind of in-depth answers that Reagor gave there that I really liked to hear. And then another thing about Ruggs as well, with Ruggs, we actually had him going to the Buffalo Bills in our last mock draft, and we got some questions about that. Why do we have him going to the Bills when we already have John Brown there? Okay, and it was actually interesting to hear a comment from him. He said that he met with the Bills at the Combine already, and he said that he really enjoyed that meeting because of his strong relationship with Bills offensive coordinator Brian Doble when he was at Bama. So, again, there's a little bit of a connection there for Ruggs and the offensive coordinator right now. Said he knows the system well, and he would not have any trouble picking it up if given the opportunity to play in Buffalo. So maybe there is a match there.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely somebody that, has that potential that could fit that offense. And just remember, when we're talking about these guys, obviously there's nothing set in stone after one 15-minute interview. That's not what's going to happen today. Kyle kind of touched on it there. We're not going to knock somebody for their answers, but you kind of have to read between the lines. You may find a little nugget here and there. And the wide receivers as a whole, we just didn't get a whole lot from them. There was not a whole lot of substance, a lot of one-word quick answers, not a whole lot that's really going to thrill you guys, the viewer out there. So we're going to move on to tight ends, and tight ends, similar to wide receivers, not a whole lot that really stood out. I mean, we got to hear from, Thaddeus Moss was somebody who a lot of people love, coming off the national championship, another guy not going to be working out. Wait until his pro day. Hunter Bryant, Cole Kmet. And then I know you also got a retweet from a mom.
Yeah, Bryce Hopkins' mom. I got a chance to see Bryce Hopkins and get a little bit of information from him and put something on Twitter, a video of that, and Bryce Hopkins' mom retweeted it and said, "Proud mama." So I was like, hey, excellent. Great job raising an awesome kid.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. But, the one thing, the takeaway from the tight ends, they're all very close right now. There's not really a standout tight end like we've seen in some years past. The one thing that was interesting, the question that came up from a lot of different reporters today is, what tape are you watching? Who do you want your game to be after? And George Kittle was the overwhelming answer because all four of these guys take a lot of pride in wanting to be good blockers and be that all-around tight end that George Kittle is. So he's really the guy that a lot of tight ends are looking at right now and saying, man, when I get to the NFL, this is who I want to be.
Yep, absolutely. There wasn't one tight end that was asked the question, what do you have, that you can improve on? None of them did not say run blocking. Yeah. I mean, that was the overwhelming answer. And like you said, George Kittle right there in that conversation. So the tight ends, not a whole lot of meat on that bone either. Just some guys we need to watch here throughout the combine process. I mean, typically tight ends are going to be somebody who's going to take a couple years in the NFL anyway to kind of acclimate to the game and get used to their new roles. There were, also a time today where some head coaches and some general managers took the podiums. We did have a chance to sit in on an interview. Kyle with Mike Mayock, me with Cliff Kingsbury. There were some nuggets in there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was standing at Kingsbury as Kyle was with Mayock, and Mayock was almost overpoweringly taking away Kingsbury. Yep. He was, very adamant and seemed to be a very good interview.
Oh, yeah. He commanded the room and everyone there, and he was a great listen. To listen to him talk, about some of these things were really cool. And I've got a couple of clips from Mayock here, and you're going to understand what I'm talking about in a second. The first clip I have is about Isaiah Simmons, a guy that I talked about a lot, talk about it in the mock draft. I love Isaiah Simmons, linebacker out of Clemson. He moved around a lot last year, and this is what Mike Mayock had to say about Simmons.
And I think the league's going that way, too, on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you start looking at guys on offense that can play in the slot, play at running back, be H-backs. There's really not a label for them. They're just either dynamic players or they're not. And then you start looking about trying to match up with those guys on defense. And, when you start looking in any division, particularly ours, in the tight ends, for instance, that we have to play in our division, and you kind of go, who matches up? You want to play man coverage, who can match up with those guys, those type of guys? They're big guys that run fast. Who do we have? So I think more and more defenses around the league are saying, who are the guys that you don't necessarily have to put a label on that are dynamic football players? And, Isaiah Simmons has played on the back end. He's played at linebacker. He's come off the edge. And really, I think the only limitations on him are whatever the defensive coordinator puts on him.
So in my mock draft, or in our mock draft that we just did, we have Simmons going a little bit before the Raiders. We've got him going to Jacksonville, but it absolutely seems like that is a guy that Mike Mayock and company have their eye on and would like to bring into the fold. Another thing too that kind of came up, and Mike Mayock praised everybody for not asking it right away, was Derek Carr. What's going on with Derek Carr? What's going on with your quarterback situation? And honestly, the answer that we got from Mayock surprised me a little bit. This is what he had to say about that.
The state of your quarterback position, where are you guys? Are you committed to Derek Carr?
I'm surprised that it took 2 questions to get to Dirk, but thank you. I mean, the bottom line is this. I think everybody needs to understand at what level Derek Carr played last year, okay? The guy completed 70% of his passes. He had almost a 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. I think we're number 11 in the league in total yards. We were 7th in third down conversions. We did a lot of really good things on offense last year. The disconnect was we didn't score a lot of points. You're 11 in yards and 24 in points. There's an issue. It's defense, it's special teams, it's not scoring in the red zone, and it's not scoring in goal to goal, okay? So to me, those are the issues. Derek Carr played at a high level. I'm very happy with Derek Carr. What I've told everybody I've been in touch with since the day I took this job is we're going to evaluate every position every year.
So here's the thing with that clip and my takeaway from it. Is it an adamant we are moving on to next year with Derek Carr? No, it's not. But he praised Derek Carr, and he said Derek Carr, was very good this year, and he did good things with the offense. Now, is there things to improve on? Absolutely. Could they move on from him? Absolutely. But the thing about Derek Carr's contract, too, is if they walk away this year, it's $7.9 million in dead cap. If they decide to do it next year, it's $2.2 million. If they do it the year after that, it's nothing. So maybe this is a situation where Las Vegas says, hey, and that was weird to say, and I got it right. I said instead of Oakland, yes. But maybe this is a situation where Las Vegas says, hey, we're actually going to keep moving forward with Derek Carr right now because Mike Mayock specifically called out his defense and said how poor it was at times last year. Maybe they focus on that defense. Maybe they focus on getting another wide receiver, see what happens with Derek Carr. Maybe they make the move to draft Tua, or maybe they make the move to draft a different quarterback and see what happens there. And if they have another poor season, they go with a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields next year. I think that's something we could end up seeing. I don't think it's necessarily important for them to move on from Derek Carr right now. Derek, not David.
Good job,
as I say sometimes.
Way to go! Way to go!
So I liked to hear that. But another thing too for you fantasy football fans out there, Mike Mayock also let everybody know that the plan is to get Josh Jacobs more involved in the passing game this year. Expect a big workload for him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely a name that popped out today. For Kingsbury, there's really 2 things that stuck out for me. One of the first questions he got was about Kenyon Drake. And he openly admitted, he said, listen, Drake got an opportunity. He picked up the offense quick. He fits the offense. We love Kenyon Drake. He wants to have Kenyon Drake back. Saying that, I mean, you kind of saw him light up a little bit when he talked about Kenyon Drake. That spells disaster for David Johnson as of right now. I mean, they say they're not going to trade him, but you never know. Chase Edmonds is somebody, who was, produced in that offense last year. But Kenyon Drake seems to have the eye right now of Cliff Kingsbury. And then secondly, this is kind of just something I picked up on. He had a question saying, has Kyler, come to you at all and tried to push for CeeDee Lamb in the first round? They're former college teammates. And you kind of saw the smirk on Kingsbury's face. He didn't really openly come out and just start smiling, but he said, yes, absolutely. If Kyler gets his way, he wants CeeDee Lamb in the first round. Now, he also said, Kyler does not make the draft picks here. He's not the overall decision maker.
Quarterback / GM.
Exactly. But you know what? Kingsbury is an offensive guy. He's always looking for wide receivers. The Cardinals have been rumored some wide receivers here in the draft. Is it out of the question? No. Do I think it's the smartest pick for the franchise? Probably not. But it would not surprise me whatsoever if CeeDee Lamb falls towards the Arizona Cardinals on draft day.
Yeah, and if it happens, I don't think it's a bad pick. I think the pick could be spent a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. There's a lot of other needs that they have there in Arizona. Offensive line being one of them to start protecting Kyler Murray. But listen, that was, the opening day. There was a lot of other things that came out after that. I mean, some stuff that we heard after we kind of left and that came out from some other GMs. One of them being Matt LaFleur. Head coach of the Green Bay Packers, he had something a little bit interesting to say today.
Yeah, he did make a comment when asked about Aaron Jones and him carrying the workload this year. Matt LaFleur actually made the comment that they'd be willing to add a third running back to kind of help with that load between him and Jamal Williams. And I hate that, absolutely hate that, not just from a fantasy football perspective, but from the perspective of the fact that Aaron Jones is really good and needs to be given the keys to this offense.
Yeah, 100%. That is something to definitely pay attention to. I don't think they need that. There's other needs in Green Bay, but if they're adding a mid-round running back, may not be a surprise. But there's a lot to take away. This was just day one of interviews for the NFL Combine. There's going to be a lot more to come, but we're trying to get you guys this information out. Me and Kyle are having a blast out here in Indianapolis, about ready to go get some dinner because we worked all day. We've been up early. We barely slept last night, but you know what? The grind continues. Make sure, and I cannot stress this enough, even if you're not a social media person, if you're interested in the content, if you're interested in football, you need to follow Kyle and myself on Twitter because we're posting all kinds of stuff all throughout the day, stuff that's not here on YouTube. Like I said, as it's coming out of their mouths, I'm literally on my phone like a troll just typing. It's just like nonstop, trying to get the information out as fast as possible. So go follow us on Twitter, not just, to make us look good on Twitter. We're not trying to get the huge follow.
No.
We
just want to get as much content to you as possible, and we try to keep these videos a little bit short. So, like I mentioned, with some of the videos being 15 minutes long, we've got those on Twitter. So it's just more content for you to take in to get you prepared for 2020 so you can learn about this draft class, whether it's a guy your favorite team is going to draft or just so you have a better overall knowledge of what's going to happen.
Yep, absolutely. So make sure you're on the lookout for a lot more content here coming out this week. If you're new here, consider hitting the subscribe button. We do football talk all year long. We'll sprinkle in a little baseball, maybe a little golf here and there, but the primary focus is going to remain NFL football. So if that's what you're looking for, you found your home. Hit the subscribe button. We greatly appreciate the support. We're looking forward to a great rest of the week out here in Indianapolis. Make sure you let us know down below in the comment section if you have any questions about a certain prospect, maybe something that we didn't cover, and you just have a question. Ask it down below in the comment section. We'd be glad to answer it and converse back and forth with you.
As always.
Kyle, we're in the same room together. It was fun.
It was fun.
If you like me and Kyle in the same room together, hit the like button because it doesn't happen very often. But you guys have a great rest of your week. Look for the rest of the content. We'll talk to you later.